Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jean Boda. I'm the Executive Director with the Alberta Community Crime Prevention Association, commonly known as ACPA. In May of this year, we will be hosting our annual Crime Prevention Conference in Edmonton, Alberta. Our dates, May the 5th through the 7th. In anticipation of this exciting event, we are hosting a series of interviews with our conference presenters. This morning, I am delighted to be interviewing a highly regarded traumatologist, crisis responder, and communicator, Mr. Eric Poirier. On May the 7th, Ms. Poirier will host a series entitled Trauma-Informed Awareness Presentation, a Comprehensive Approach. We're delighted you could join us today, Eric. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, especially about your expertise in the field of trauma?
Thank you so much, Jean. Appreciate it. And I'm excited to be out there. This is the first time that I get invited to go out, especially out west, actually, for one of these talks. So Perfect. This is great. A bit about myself. I'm currently in the rail industry and I work as a manager in safety compliance. I was a chair and a member of our mental health committee. I still design mental health programs as well. And I've designed trauma-informed incident response programs, incident response and interviewing. And a lot of that started when I was actually looking for additional resources while I was actually seeking help for myself. And it's interesting how life happens for us.
Excellent.
Based on, events that we think are difficult to go through. And then all of a sudden, these resources start coming to the forefront. It essentially came about during my research while I was getting my own help. I just wanted to know more because I was very much interested in the things that were being told to me and how I was perceiving, the world around me. And so what I found out is that I was suffering from vicarious and secondary trauma and some other, things that would be known to be attached to the ACE score, so the adverse childhood experiences and so on. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of unresolved and stored traumatic energy that as a result of what I was doing for a living and what I still do during interviews, I was storing a lot of that negative energy, that traumatic energy. Mm-hmm. And eventually, unprocessed trauma comes out in very different ways. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to know more about that. So I started studying at the Traumatology Institute, which is located in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. That was founded by Dr. Anna Baranowski and Dr. Eric Gentry. So they started this institute for people that didn't have or weren't at the level of either clinicians or doctors. And they basically wanted to help people become expert companions or what they would otherwise know as paraprofessionals. Mm-hmm. To help people that, are in crisis, to help people with post-traumatic growth process, and just to overall remove stigma around the conversation of mental health and trauma, and also suicide prevention and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. So that's where it started for me. And then it moved into wanting to know more. And then I became certified as an certified in mental health first aid, and then suicide first aid. And then the suicide first aid program, which is the assist program, interested me so much, I wanted to become an instructor, a registered instructor. So a year after I did the program, I went out and I did their program to become a registered instructor, which I am now. So I also teach that. And then as early as this summer, I became a post-traumatic growth specialist through the Forward Facing Institute as well. Now it's called Resilia. The cool thing about that whole circle, really neat, is that the person who I got certified as a post-traumatic growth specialist from, the person she designed that program with is Dr. Eric Gentry. Oh. Her name is Jenny Brackman. So Dr. Eric Gentry helped her design her program, the one I just recently completed, or most recently completed. And he also helped design the community and workplace traumatologist program that I did. So it's really neat how things come around full circle.
It is.
And then because I want to keep helping, one of these things that really happened, and I'm not going to reveal too much about it, I'm going to be starting a registered clinical hypnotherapy program in March. And should everything go well, let's knock on, let's hope. January 2026, I should be a registered clinical hypnotherapist, and I'm going to specialize in trauma recovery. And what I really want to do is help law enforcement, first responders, and veterans.
Excellent. Well, congratulations, Eric. And yeah, a much needed field. And it is interesting how our life takes its little turns we don't expect to do. I'm like you, though. When I don't understand something, I want to know more about it. Just the curiosity. Well, that's very interesting. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. And
You're welcome.
The institution you said is in Toronto?
It's based out of Toronto, Ontario. Yeah.
That's a bonus.
It is, and they have a really cool podcast as well called the Bear Psychology Podcast, which I listen to. You can listen to it on all the podcast platforms. The other interesting thing too is that when I first, like how you and I kind of got together, is when I just got on back to social media, like for a few months anyways at the time, and my message was to spread positivity and to help people understand that there are some, mental and physical health are intertwined. They're not mutually exclusive from each other. And so during that process, I was also studying martial arts. Okay. And I ended up meeting up with one of my trainers and coaches, and he found out what I did for a living, some of the stuff that I did. We got together and we created Train for Trauma Combative Sciences. So we offer trauma-informed martial arts programs and self-defense programs for the community. So that's super cool too. And again, that wasn't the intention when I got back onto social media. It was, I just wanted to spread a message. And now the Train for Trauma tagline that I had on my Instagram is turned into something completely different. So interesting. And then I got invited to post-secondary education to speak. On LinkedIn, I got connected with Maxwell, which then connected me with you, and then we're here. So I'm just learning to let the universe do its thing.
Yeah, exactly. Go with the flow. No, that's excellent. Well, thank you very much for sharing all of that with us. So about the workshop, you'll be talking about trauma-informed awareness with first responders. Can you maybe tell us how that's incorporated into their operations?
So, okay, so if we were to incorporate, and again, I don't want to reveal how I want to deliver it at the because I've only got 45 minutes there and then some Q&A. So I want to make sure I make a positive impact and it happens real good, and it's a real good one. So how it can impact from like the first responder community as a whole. If we can learn to understand that how people perceive an event is their own belief, right? It's what they call in the trauma training world, it's their shattered assumptions on what the world is or what the environment is around them. Why do I say that? The reason I say that is because everybody has a specific core value and a core language code, built into them based on what they grew up with or how they lived. There's epigenetics and core values that they say. And again, I'm not going to get into too much of that, but you and I could see the same situation. And what I would perceive as a traumatic incident, you might not. And so from a first responder community, understanding that not every person we go to that maybe, or, we're called to go, or they're called to go to a situation, they get information from dispatch. It's not going to be the same thing for every person they show up to talk to and to intervene with. Their core language is different everybody from the next one. So understanding that and being able to meet somebody where they're at in the moment is incredibly important, and it can have a great positive impact on the outcome of that event.
Interesting. Yeah. And you're right. And where a person comes from what their upbringing was. Yeah, yeah, very, very important. That is for a culture, even sometimes can
There's
be.
culture. Yeah, I mean, there's cultural backgrounds, there's religious backgrounds, their core beliefs,
Yeah,
everything, and they're not bad, right? Like they're not
yeah,
inherently all of them that bad. It's just how they understand and perceive the situation.
yeah,
Context dictates behavior, as one of my professors said once, and
yeah,
that's true, right?
yeah,
Um, anybody who's has kids, we
yeah,
have this, we have this me theory that we kind of approach things with, is like, well, why are they so out of shape? Why are they so bent out of shape? I wouldn't have done that.
yeah,
But we often forget, wait a minute, why is it that they're doing that? Let's really take a look at that question, right?
yeah,
I'm trying to apply that me theory and say, well, I wouldn't have done it. Was, hang on a second, let's take a step back and say, there's a reason for it. Let's
yeah,
actually meet them where they're at and try and figure out what that reason is.
yeah, yeah. I agree with you very much. That's right. Yeah, and it's interesting. Over the years, my children have taught me, like you say, you make those statements in a situation, and my kids have said, where did you get that information? Like, why are you saying that? It's very common for us, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So would you mind sharing an example of where trauma informed awareness saved a challenging situation, and maybe something that's particularly personal to you? Have you had an experience that you could share with us, possibly?
I've had, yes, one of them that I often like to share, the story that I like to convey, and provide to people. To me, it is impactful for me every time. It kind of gets me choked up a little bit every time I say it. Um, I don't want to say that it gets easier every time I say it.
Right,
It
right.
gets more, it becomes more fluid when I speak of it.
Yeah.
Um, but this one particularly happened in the summer of 2000. Well, it started then. And at the time, I was simply one of those. I was trained in basic crisis response stuff. I worked in the railroad, and I still work for the railroad, but I was, new to the railroad, newer, a few years on at the time, and there was a fatal event in one of the locating in one of in the network that I worked in. I'm not really going to mention where it happened, but there's a fatal event, and I happened to hear the radio transmission on the occur. I heard the communication, and then I heard that the first response for crisis intervention was a few hours away. At the
Mm,
time that I heard it, I was 15, 20 minutes from the scene. So after speaking with the Rail Traffic Control Center, I received permission and I was dispatched to go and actually go to the scene and help out. Identified myself to local law enforcement, identified myself to the train crew and to the train master that was out there. And I just started to do the intervention. And how I approached it, because I didn't know much, and based on the little knowledge that they gave us at the time,
mhm,
I just approached it from a compassionate and empathetic perspective, and told them who I was, why I was there, informed them that, whenever they're ready, they can talk.
mhm.
And it seemed what seemed like an eternity, because the type of event that had occurred. We were sitting in the cab of the train, or the locomotive, and it was like 10, 20 minutes that had passed. And then we just finally started talking, not even about the situation, just started talking about random things.
Right, right.
Eventually, it turned into conversations that related to the moment,
Yeah.
but they weren't very intense. It was more of how they felt at the time. They were worried about certain things with respect to, working and that sort of stuff, being off. And it was one of those things where I just tried to reassure them. I was like, look, this is beyond your control. I don't think can try, I can assuage you a little bit in saying that
Mhm,
this is stuff that you can't control, and let's just be in the moment, and I'll help you talk about it. Right.
mhm,
So
mhm,
trying to be positive with them, and give them that optimism,
mhm,
or that little that I shouldn't say optimism, the lighthouse in the fog,
Right.
right? Help them stay on a positive path, so to speak.
Yeah.
A few hours had gone by, coroner had arrived, the crisis response that was supposed to be there, which is more qualified than I, had arrived. There was a debrief, a handoff of information. I was debriefed by my regional supervisor, and essentially life went on. About 5 years to the day, I was working as a contractor and I was dispatched to a remote location in Northern Ontario. And when I say remote locations with the railroad, they're extremely remote. Like once you get out there, there's nothing to do. You're not going anywhere else but seeing railroad tracks and trees,
Yeah.
or fields, depending on where you are.
Yeah.
And during the audit, I ended up meeting up with this gentleman and get into the truck, and we're taking a ride in the high rail truck. And we're having conversations about our careers, talking about why I'm there also, and performing the audit. We're through with the audit, time's going by, but we're stuck out there. There's not much we can do. So those that are in law enforcement or other services like the military and stuff would understand what gallows humor is. And so we had some few jokes here and there, but then there was a question that he had asked me. And the question is if I'd ever been to a fatal event. And I had said yes. And he asked me if there was one that I remembered particularly. And I said, and so I started describing one of them. And I'll never forget it. We're sitting in the truck and he dropped his stuff. And just kind of like not dropped it like frantically or like aggressively. It just sort of just fell out of his hands. And he looked at me and I could feel the hair go up on my arms. And so I looked at him and I'm like, what's he gonna do? I wasn't sure what was gonna happen there. And he asked, he goes, "Oh my God, that was you?" And I was like, I asked him his name and he told me his name. And then I was like, "Oh my God, yeah, it's me." I'm like, and then he said, "Yeah, I'm the engineer."
Oh.
And we get out of the vehicle on both sides and we get to the front of the truck and we just started talking. And then he just gave me this really, really big hug.
Oh.
And he's a taller man. His mitts are like, his hands are probably as big as my head. He could have picked me up if he wanted to, but he gives me this big hug and then puts me down. And then like I'm crying, he's crying. We kind of give each other that look of like, I'm not crying, you're crying. Wipe our eyes. And he says to me, he's like, "I'm so happy that you were there." And I said, I'm happy I could help. And again, I'm not going to reveal too much information, but he also described to me that when he was informed of the time frame that the original responder could have gotten there in, he informed me of some of the things that were going through his head that were not very positive, and that the fact that I was able to go changed the trajectory of that. And so to me, the impact that we can have on somebody's life by simply being there to listen, meet them where they are in the moment, and help them just unload if they want to. A lot of the post-traumatic growth journey is a personal sense of agency that needs to be restored in a person's life. The trauma is how they perceive the event that occurred. It's not the event itself. And so if somebody has this perception or this belief that things just won't get better, or they don't believe that there's anybody there to help, sometimes that can be very negative. But being there right in the moment, just to be able to meet somebody where they're at, that's a massive positive for me. And that is what I like to think about when I actually teach trauma-informed incident response, or when I'm teaching suicide prevention, in that I try and think of myself about what I did that day. I didn't have a lot of training at that time. It was very basic.
Mhm.
but I try and mirror or at least take very good and positive things from how I responded to that situation
Yeah,
into every conversation that I can have with another person that may or may not be in crisis.
that's right.
What's the harm of taking that approach if nothing's wrong?
That's right. Nothing. That's right.
There's no harm. But if there is something wrong, even if they don't say it
Yeah,
in that moment, it could have a really good impact on them.
that's right. And that shows your story. That's powerful. That's a very powerful story. Can you imagine what he was going through? I can't, like you say, being the engineer. Yeah, no, we never know how we impact people, how our actions, what can happen. And like you say, years later,
Mhm.
hear about it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a very powerful story. I hope you're going to share that with the delegates at the conference. That's something that needs to be, because there again, we need to talk about this. We really need to bring
Yeah.
this to the shadows.
Yeah. And I understand. I mean, we have to normalize the discussion for sure. We
Exactly.
have to, we got to do our best to make sure that we let people know that we can be there. And
Yeah,
again, meet them where they're at. That's the most important thing.
that's right.
Um, but I also understand that in certain lines of work, I mean, there's very limited, the landscape kind of restricts what people can and cannot talk about.
Yeah,
But there are unique solutions to those unique problems as well.
that's right.
There's somatic healing in terms of the mind body connection, self, meditation. There's all kinds of stuff that can happen. It's just helping people find what works for them,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
Similar to how trauma affects us from a mental health perspective. I'm not going to be affected the exact same way that you will.
Yeah,
My coping strategies and my positive, my use of coping and healing and post-traumatic growth might not be the same for you,
that's right.
or anybody else. So it's introducing the info,
Yeah,
giving the resources, knowing where to look, and then people will find what works for them in a
yeah,
positive way.
yeah. They will, seriously. And knowing someone's there for them. They've got someone has their back, right? That's
100%.
yeah, that is something that people really, really need to realize.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure chatting with you this morning, Eric. And it's nice that we can give our viewers a little snippet of what you're looking to talk about. So I'm looking forward to hearing your presentation. Yeah, in fact, when you were telling that story, it give me goosebumps, right? It's just like, wow, yeah, amazing. So if our viewers are interested in the conference presenters and what they're looking to present, please visit our website, www.albertacrimeprevention.com. And with that, I will bid you a good day. Stay warm. If you're in the east, stay out of the snow. And thank you very much. And thank you again, Eric, for your time this morning. It's been very, very enlightenment. Been enlightening for me. Anyways,
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so
and
much, Gene.
not a problem. Thank you.